Standard 3 is a standard that is going to take a lot longer for areas to develop and implement fully, and will change as drug trends change. Standard 3 was thought out around people who are at risk of drug harm who are not in treatment or are in treatment. So if someone has been identified as having a near fatal overdose and the Scottish Ambulance Service has been called, or perhaps Police Scotland has been called, or it may be that a hostel or a housing agency knows that this person has been at higher risk of drug death, the standard is that there should be an appropriate response in a very timely way, regardless of whether you are in treatment or not. So we have set some parameters that we expect people to be followed up in an assertive way. When we talk about assertive outreach, we are meaning that you would go out to where that person is in a way that they can engage. So we would expect a very assertive model, not phoning someone or holding someone's, for example, methadone at a pharmacy to say, please come in to re-review you. It's doing it in a very person-centred way to go out and find out what that risk is and is there any harm reduction measures that can be taken. Standard is given very specific timelines. We would expect it to be within the 24 hours, but no later than 72 hours. The standard also talks about anticipatory care, so that's allowing people to have discussion about what they would like to happen and anticipating how do we continue to reduce harm to someone who has been at risk of a near fatal overdose or any other drug harms. We would like to see some work done on people having discussions if they've been at risk of harm and what they would like to happen. The standard also indicates that a family member should be able to contact a service to say they're concerned about their loved one. And I think it's really vital to say that we have to look at the wider drug harms here and not just near fatal overdose. So other areas of high risk would be someone who is transitioning through a justice service, so if they've had been within police custody overnight or over a weekend, if they have been liberated from prison or indeed gone into a prison establishment, we would expect that same timely response, that that person's followed up to see how their needs are best met in an assertive way. So we really need pathways that allow to follow the person regardless of where they are at any given time. We are doing some work just now around preparing some guidelines around implementation of MAT3 to tease this out further as to what does someone at high risk of drug harm mean. So moving away from just thinking about the point where someone has had a near fatal overdose, it could be in terms of social factors such as having benefits sanctioned, other risk factors around heating, homelessness, loss of a relationship, a child being removed, mental distress, other physical issues. In order to implement this standard is really to look at a multi-risk assessment across agencies to almost put together that picture to identify why someone's at risk of harm. We often hear from services that someone always presents a certain way, so it may be someone is often intoxicated when they present, perhaps to housing, to welfare agencies or indeed the substance use service, but actually if you were to piece together that risk assessment you would be able to identify why someone is at higher risk of harm and when they may need that assertive outreach. The assertive outreach needs to be person-centred, it needs to be centred around the needs of the person, and it should not be a threshold where it's only where opiates are identified. This is where we really need to be assertive for people using benzodiazepines and stimulants harmfully, and the approach and the intervention should be catered around what that person wishes at that time and the priorities for that person on that particular day. There has to be follow-up and a named person accountable for that ongoing follow-up and assertive outreach. We also need to see assertive outreach not as a 1 or 2 appointment basis in the back of a high risk being identified. It may be assertive outreach is the approach that someone may need indeed for months or for much longer than having to come into a service.